Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Lianas Senior Transition Support, specialists in downsizing and seniors residences.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Delvecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry.
And I'm Corrie Matt, a clinical social worker and psychotherapist specializing in grief and loss.
Coming right up on the first half of today's show, being more inclusive with sexual diversity in senior settings, a very hot topic as we age. And that's going to be coming up very, very soon. But first, Corrie, I'm so excited to sort of announce our new revised format. So starting today, the second half of each show of Life Unrehearsed will be a segment called Helping Moms and Dads. And we're going to be having a bunch of interesting and knowledgeable guests covering a whole array of topics that will help families cope with the challenges of the aging process, specifically for the sandwich generation, worried about mom or dad or your grandparents. And that's going to start today. So, Corrie, who do we have leading it off on today's first segment coming on the second half?
So we are going to be discussing basically the difference between power of attorney and protection mandates because, these are very difficult and confusing terms, and they are life unrehearsed issues. We're also going to have Katie talking about potential risks and hazards in your home, things to look out for. All of that and so much more is coming up after the 3:30 news.
Yeah, can't wait for that, Corrie.
But first, I've been looking forward to this topic for a while. Julien Rougerie is the program manager at Fondation Émergence. Fondation Émergence is a nonprofit organization which fights against homophobia and transphobia. They have a wonderful advocacy program called Aging Gayfully, love that name, which raises awareness for our senior citizens. Julien, welcome to Life Unrehearsed.
Hello.
So glad you're here. So let's start off with a basic general question. What are some of the challenges facing the LGBTQ plus community as they age?
Well, I would say that the first challenge that they face is that often or very often they don't feel comfortable or safe being openly LGBTQ plus, especially in senior settings, for example, where they remain very, very mostly invisible. So this fear can be explained by many things, but mostly by the fact that, they experience a society that was extremely hostile to sexual and gender diversity. When we think about it not so long ago, that was still considered a crime, a mental disease, a sin. So they basically had to survive. And sometimes when they age, this defense mechanism can still be part of their strategy to navigate, senior settings or health services, for example. So, that would be the main challenge, is being visible and also socially isolated, because that's related to being invisible.
Julien, it's amazing to hear that, as they're growing up, it was considered a crime, in their age. It's unimaginable nowadays. And you used the term hide to survive, and we're seeing that. I see that a lot in my world and in senior settings. And I'll give you an example of, I was taking one particular client who was gay. He was in his 70s and looking to go into a retirement home. And you could see he was very anxious and stressed, even just walking through the residence, and he whispered to me and he said, "You know what? I'm going to have to come out all over again." It was quite stressful for him. So I'm just wondering, Julien, are there any statistics available concerning the LGBTQ plus community as a percentage of the population regarding, adults in their 60s, let's say 60s, 70s, and 80s versus people in their 20s and 30s? Is it consistent or it's different?
Oh, it's basically the same thing. We know, and we've tried to calculate this for since the 40s now, but we know it's about 10 to 15% of the general population who is LGBTQ plus, and that can be somehow hard to measure. So let's say between 10 and 15%, and we know LGBTQ plus people always existed. So. Mm-hmm. Seniors are necessarily representative of the general population. So it's also 10-50% of the senior population who is LGBTQ+, but they tend to be much more invisible than the younger generation.
Well, that makes perfect sense to me. If you have 10 to 15% of the younger, well, they get older at some point. So, of course, the numbers are going to be the same or maybe even higher if they didn't come out till they were older. You mentioned the term invisibility. Tell me about the consequences of invisibility.
Oh, well, there's a lot of consequences about being invisible, but for the LGBTQ plus seniors, I would say that being invisible leads to more social isolation for them. And being socially isolated is going to have consequences on your well-being. We know through studies, for example, that LGBTQ plus seniors tend to be more exposed to mental health problems and mistreatment. So they can be isolated because they don't dare to be who they are. They don't dare to be openly LGBTQ+. But also through their lives, they face rejection sometimes from their family, from their colleagues, from society in general. So that can be a bit of a vicious circle, between rejection and being invisible. That's why they tend to be more socially isolated than the average senior population.
You're listening to Life on Rehearse. Matt Delvecchio here with Corrie Sirota, and we're talking about being more inclusive in senior settings with Julien Rougerie, Program Manager at Fondation Émergence. They have a wonderful program called Aging Gayfully. And Julien, you're bringing up such important points, and you talk about perhaps the mental health of older LGBTQ plus, because it is more challenging. And I would imagine on the other side of it, the older generation can sometimes be uncomfortable and less accepting of the LGBTQ plus community. And is this a common complaint that you hear?
It is a common complaint that I hear, but mostly from, senior setting management. Their automatic response is that, we don't have a problem with sexual diversity, but our residents do have a problem with that, but that's not something that we observe when we offer training sessions and workshops in senior settings. Once again, seniors are representative of the general population, so it's probably base in ageism to consider that because you're older, you would be less aware or accepting about sexual diversity and gender diversity. And actually, when you break the taboo and when you talk about that with seniors, everybody has a story about that. So it's not that much of a taboo within seniors, but it's pretty much a taboo still in senior settings, on the institution level.
I hear you. So let's get down to, I guess, down to the level of what do we do about it? What can senior living communities do to make it more acceptable?
So the situation now is we're in a bit of a vicious circle here because the 10% of seniors who are LGBTQ+, they don't feel safe coming out. And because they don't mention that they're LGBTQ+, the institutions don't feel like they need to be more demonstrative in their acceptation of LGBTQ+ communities. And because they never mention it, it's a signal for seniors that maybe it's best to mention it and to hide or to isolate. So what they need to do is to be the first to break the taboo and to raise awareness. They can count on Fondation Émergence for that. Like we offer workshops, traveling exhibitions, information guides, anything they need to actually break the taboo and start talking about it and start being a bit proactive in showing that this is a safe place for the LGBTQ plus communities.
Yeah, very interesting you're saying that. And it has to start somewhere. You're absolutely right. There is an opportunity for some to take a leadership position, but I see it's a bit of a slippery slope because their clientele could be concerned about these situations. But I think it's just a matter of time for senior communities to be more proactive and accepting and even have some initiatives. And you are one of the leaders in trying to educate educate not just senior communities, but in fact, that's what we want to bring up next. Julien, we have to head out to traffic, but when we come back, we want to bring it more to us as individuals and what you can do to be more inclusive. But first,
welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corrie Sirota along with my co-host Matt Del Vecchio, and we are talking about being more inclusive in senior settings with Julien Rougerie. He's the program manager at Fondation Émergence. We need to do better, Julien, and I am so grateful for you and your organization for what you're doing and how you're helping us be better. So I'm going to ask more specifically, what can we do both as individuals and as a society to be more inclusive?
So the first thing to do, and it's going to sound very general, but it's once again to be the proactive and to be the first one to break the taboo of sexual diversity. In the training session that we give for senior settings, that we give good practices, and I can give you some of them. The first one is to seize every opportunity you have to say something positive about sexual diversity, or to talk about something that is happening in the news, or to observe a day like the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia on May 17th. These are all examples of little things that you can do on a daily basis. Maybe you can also see that the employees working there, those who are LGBTQ+, make sure that they feel comfortable being openly LGBTQ+ in their work environment. So these are all little things that you can do to make sure that people are going to feel more comfortable coming out. That can also be using an inclusive language. Sometimes you may not even realize it, but by the way you express yourself, if, for example, if you ask an older lady if she is still living with her husband, you're projecting in your language the fact that you expect this person to be heterosexual. So a good practice, for example, would be to avoid putting a gender on someone's partner. Do you live with someone? Do you share your life with someone? Are you single? Are you married? All of those questions are allow people to answer without actually disclosing the gender of their partner. Also, there are many good practices, and I'm not going to be able to give them all on this interview. But for trans or non-binary people, it's also very important to respect their gender identity and respect the pronouns that they are using for themselves. So these are an example of good practices that can be implemented in senior settings on a daily basis to provide those environments with more, I'd say, a more welcoming atmosphere for the LGBTQ+ communities.
Yeah, listen to Life Unrehearsed. That's Julien Rougerie. He's the program manager at Fondation Émergence, talking about their program called Aging Gayfully. And Julien, you brought up some very good points, very simple to understand points that we could all do sort of in our day-to-day lives. And obviously, we have a lot more work to do. However, I would assume, and I'd like you to just get your input here concerning Quebec versus the rest of Canada. Do you think we are a little bit more inclusive already, even though we have a lot of work to do?
Well, that's really hard to say, Matt. What I could say for a fact is that Quebec was the first province in Canada to ban discrimination based on sexual orientation. That was in 1977. So on that part, Quebec was ahead of Canada, that's for sure. Because Canada in general, on the federal at the federal level, they passed the same law in 1996. So it's extremely recent in Canada.
Unbelievable. That's a 20-year gap, Julien. Could you imagine?
Yes.
It's amazing.
But once again, it's really hard to hard to measure and compare, because passing laws is one very important thing. That's actually the first step. But it's not because there are laws against discrimination that LGBTQ+ people are not discriminated anymore. Sexism and racism is illegal for much longer than that, and yet we're still struggling as a society to eliminate sexism and racism. So laws are the first step, but it's hard to generalize, as a society if they are more accepting than the other.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So can you provide us with some more information about your organization called Fondation Émergence? What's the mission? What's the funding, governors, all that kind of stuff? Because I'd like to know, and I'm sure our listeners as well would like to know more about what it is you're doing.
So Fondation Émergence is LGBTQ plus nonprofit. It was created by militant Laurent McCutcheon in 2000, so it's 21 years old now. We're mostly famous for creating the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia, which is celebrated around the world on May 17th. So we're mostly known for that. It's an awareness campaign that we do on a different topic every year. But we also have different programs such as Aging Gayfully that we're talking about today, and also another program, Pro-Ally, which is dedicated to be more inclusive in the workplace.
Yeah, it's a wonderful site, and I can't believe the number of members and governors supporting it. How is it funded if it's nonprofit?
Oh, so for the Aging Gayfully program, for example, we're mostly financed by the Ministry of Health and Social Services of Quebec. That would be the main sponsor of the program for the Aging Gayfully. And for the Fondation Émergence in general, it's a mix, I would say, of donations and subsidies.
So I wondered, let's talk about this day you created. What happens on that day? What are some of the initiatives that happen on that? You said May 17th?
Yes, and actually it's not a random date because it's underlining May 17th, 1990. That's the date where the World Health Organization removed homosexuality from the list of mental disease. So that's an international date, so that's why it became the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia.
Very interesting. We're just wrapping things up, Julien. We're with Julien Rougerie. He's the program manager at Fondation Émergence and talking about some of the programs. And just as we wrap up, could we get your suggestions? I'm thinking about those members of the LGBTQ plus community and at home, maybe considering moving into senior communities. Where can they go? What can they do to find more resources and I guess to be more comfortable in senior settings? What would you suggest to them?
Well, I would suggest them to reach out to us. We're here for that, so they can reach out to us. The best would go to contact us from our website on fondationemergence.org, and they'll find all of the information there to contact us. So order our awareness material like posters, stickers, traveling exhibition, information guide, to order a workshop or a training session. Everything is there available for them in English or French and for free.
Well, all right, Julien, thank you very much. And like you said, for everyone, we can all do better in terms of good practices and seizing the opportunity to talk more about it. And we want to wish you continued success and continue your great work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that's Julien Rougerie. He's the program manager at Fondation Émergence, and you can see them at Fondation, that's the French version of Foundation, Emergence.org.